Hi, everyone. Welcome back to week 6 of online course content for climate change monitoring in Northwest Territories. So this week we're going over site-specific expectations. So we're hearing about tips and tricks that are related to each of the research stations that we're affiliated with through this project. So this week, as you've already seen, I'm interviewing different primary investigators about the research stations that they're affiliated with. So today we have Dr. Phillip Marsh, Canada Research Chair and Professor in Geography at Wilfrid Laurier University, which is located in Waterloo, Ontario. Phil's research in Arctic hydrology focuses on the Hands Creek, Habitat Creek, and Trail Valley Creek watersheds, which are all located near Inuvik, Northwest Territories. So thank you so much for being here with us today, Phil.
Yeah, thanks very much for the introduction, Emma.
Amazing, no problem. So we're going to jump right into it. So maybe we can sort of start things off by you telling us a bit about the history of Trail Valley Creek as a research station and how you fit into this historical context.
Yeah, thanks very much. So I've worked in the Canadian Arctic for many years since I did my graduate level training and started working in the Inuvik area in the early 1980s as when I worked with Environment Canada, mostly working in the Mackenzie Delta area, but then wanted to sort of expand out of that onto sort of upland hydrology interests. And at that time, there was some very original on new planning at that time for the Inuvik to Tuk Highway. So we were convinced to work at some ongoing sites from Water Survey of Canada, and Trail Valley Creek was one of them. So we set up a long-term, what ended up being a long-term research station at Trail Valley Creek in 1991, and we've been working there every year since then. And collected a fantastic sequence of data at the site. And then at the same time, we started the Habitat Creek research station as well.
Wow. Yeah, I bet it's changed a lot since then as well.
It has changed a lot. Some of the things that have changed, we probably didn't pay attention to them early on. So we haven't documented through some of our observations directly. But we can go back using remote sensing and look at changes in vegetation, for example, or changes in ice wedge polygons, which in the early 1990s weren't that obvious, flying around or walking around, but now they've melted, thawed so much that it's really obvious for sure.
Yeah, you can see so many of them even just on Google Maps. It's really cool.
Yeah, it's quite remarkable. Yeah.
Cool. Impressive that you've been there for so long. Awesome.
Yeah. It's it's a great place to work, right? I mean, it's a lovely environment, great support from local community groups and organizations, and long-term data. I mean, the water survey data goes back to the late 1970s. So there's really no place else in the Canadian Arctic that has the long-term research data sets as this area does.
That's amazing. Yeah. Thanks for introducing the site. So we're going to move on to question 1.
Okay.
So can you provide us with one or two of the long-term research questions that are related to the work at this research station and how they fit into the context of climate change research?
Yeah, sure. So when we started the work at Trail Valley, for example, in 1991, the main driver of that really was providing data that might be needed to develop and build the Inuvik Tuk Highway. But on top of that, long-term climate change research. So we've been doing climate change research in that area since the early 1990s and when we first published data and papers on it. So part of our research has been just developing new methods to predict, new methods to understand past changes and the impacts of climate on hydrology and all aspects of water, and also to think a bit about what the future is going to bring. Because my my sort of expertise is really on sort of local scale changes, and I don't think many research groups haven't really looked at sort of those small scale changes that are of interest to local communities, for example.
Which are really important when you consider the larger picture anyways.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, right. So we're focusing a lot on sort of local changes.
Okay,
So it's understanding the system and developing better models to consider changes.
amazing. Thank you. That's awesome. So question two, how do you think that this research station is unique from all the other research stations in the North? And I mean, they're all unique in their own little way, but maybe a couple of things that you think makes Trail Valley really unique.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really unique because it's located at the Arctic tree line. So
Wow.
Havipat Creek is almost entirely forested. Trail Valley is almost entirely tundra, but tundra with sort of small patches of trees and shrubs, for example. And
Mhm.
then, um, and it's lake poor, so there's not many lakes in Trail Valley Creek. But Hands Creek is interesting because it's a little bit further north, so the vegetation is a bit different, but it's extremely lake rich as well. So it provides that nice combination of them. So, and 30 years of research data and whatever it is, 40 plus years of Water Survey of Canada data. So
Yeah.
I don't think there's many places in Arctic Canada that have that combination. So it's unique and it sort of complements what other research stations across Arctic Canada present as well, right?
And another thing that I noticed that was really unique the other day is that you can actually go in and see the camp on like Google Maps,
Yeah.
which
Yes, absolutely.
not a lot of places have that. You can go in on Street View and actually take a look around.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's really
Yeah.
cool.
That's yeah. Yeah. So that's nice. And it's close to the highway, so you can actually walk into. There aren't very many, maybe no other research camps in Arctic Canada that basically have road access.
Yeah, I mean, it's right there, which is
Yeah,
great. If anything goes wrong with your skidoo snowmobile, there's always
it
like a
is.
backup
Yeah,
thing.
it adds an extra safety component to it for sure.
Definitely,
Yeah.
which we love. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Great. Okay, question three.
Hmm.
How do you prepare students and or researchers to visit Trail Valley Creek or to do field work for the first time? Because I know you have a lot of students coming in there every year. So
We do. So we have students that the full range from, never being um, into a remote site like that to those would be undergraduate student to new PhD students have worked in other locations in the Arctic. So it changes dramatically depending on who it is. Um, but everybody has to have basic safety training, wilderness first aid, firearm safety, in certain cases, tower safety. All of those safety components are a big part. And then we um, other training is basically on-site training, right?
mhm.
Is really the only way that we train students for that environment. Um, we make sure they work with other researchers, whether they're um, senior PhD or postdocs that have Arctic experience, or some of our research associates that have worked in the Arctic for a long time. So it's really on-site training, and when we bring in new students or other members of our team, we really do try to make sure that they realize that we're providing them a good, safe learning environment, right? And we've tried to make the Trail Valley Creek camp so it's a nice, inviting sort of environment. Because a lot of students might not be at all comfortable being at a remote site where you basically can't walk out. You're sort of in that sense, right? So it's a very different approach. And so we just make sure that everybody's comfortable with that, being in that kind of an environment, and then learning on the job basically through, yeah.
I can definitely attest to it being like a really lovely site to go visit. So that
Well,
definitely sounds
yes,
really
yeah,
beautiful.
it's a lovely site, right? Yeah,
Yeah. And that is when you learn the most too, is when you're actually there doing everything. And that's probably hard to, ask about in advance.
yeah. I mean, all of our students would have done a minimum of 3 years of university training in earth sciences and hydrology.
Mhm,
Probably did a field camp in Southern Ontario or
mhm.
wherever else they'd done some training. But it's completely different when um, you go into the Arctic and these remote sites, and everything's way more difficult. And there's a lot more training, and you can really only do that through on-the-job training for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, which is great. I can definitely say it's a stimulating experience when you're troubleshooting, and yeah, one that I
Yeah,
find super
yeah,
enjoyable.
yeah. And then, I mean, I guess I should add on to that, depending on students, we'll also send them to other sort of training courses. So
Mm,
Campbell Scientific
yeah.
provides training for their data logger systems,
Mm,
for example, and similar to other types of instrumentation, will provide students with that kind of training as well.
yeah, really great courses that they have. Yeah,
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, yeah.
great. Amazing. So question 4. In what way is this research station evolving or changing over time? And I mean, it's been a long time. In terms of the work that's being done, or maybe the people that are involved, what are
Yeah.
some of the largest changes that you've observed? And do you have any visions for how this research station might change over time?
Well, that's a long question.
Yeah, sorry. It's kind of like 3 questions in one, but you
Yeah, well,
can
that's
answer.
cheating.
Yeah.
um, so how's it changed? So I started it, as I said before, when I was with Environment Canada, and we continued running it from 1991 until I left Environment Canada in 2013. Um, and during that time, it evolved. It was funded through various Environment Canada projects and other national and international things, including International Polar Year, for example. So it evolved over that time. The infrastructure was fairly basic, both from the camp side and from the instrumentation side. And when I left Environment Canada, there was only a small weather station there. The camp had been completely removed at some point.
Oh, wow.
So when I came to Laurier, um, one of the reasons I came here was to completely renew all of the infrastructure at Trail Valley. So we've
Oh,
had
wow.
2 large Canada Foundation for Innovation grants and other types of grants, and we've completely replaced all of the scientific infrastructure. We've built a brand new camp. So the camp is got 3 large weather havens, outhouses, big electrical generating station, um, a sea can for safe storage of food and other supplies,
Mhm.
um, tent platforms for, I don't know, 8 or 9, 10 tents, sleeping tents, for example. So we can house about 10 people super comfortably, 15 people a little more not so comfortable,
Mhm.
in all weather conditions. So when we rebuilt at the camp, we really focused on making it so we can operate it year round, in the winter as well, because we wanted to really focus on wintertime observations as well, which weren't as easy previously. And we have satellite internet connection there now.
Mhm.
Because a lot of the instrumentation we have requires, software, firmware updates. It's much safer now with good internet connection, et cetera. So it's evolved tremendously over time. Um, so, I mean, we really want to take these sort of type of science we can do there to sort of the next generation. When what
Mhm.
we were doing up to 2013 was pretty good at the time, but some of the questions we're asking now required, much better camp facilities and much better improved scientific instrumentation as well. So from the eddy covariance instrumentation to upward-looking weather radar for measuring precipitation more accurately, to cosmic ray sensors for measuring soil moisture in the summer, snow cover in the winter. So we're trying to upgrade and measure really accurately all of the important hydrologic, water, energy flux, carbon flux conditions we need.
Wow, those
And
are
what
some
was the rest? What
changes.
was the rest of your question?
Yeah, so that pretty much addressed
Oh,
most of it. And then the next part was if you have any visions for how this research station will change. But I mean, you've kind of answered that as well. And
yeah. I do have a bit more to say about the vision, though,
Mhm.
because I think that's a pretty important part of it. So the vision is to have a fantastic data set that allows us to use and test next generation models for predicting the future. And one of the things I've one of the things that I really think as a vision at what we need to do is that scientists generally limit themselves to thinking about how climate is going to impact water or the environment over the next, to 20, next 30 years, or maybe to 2100 at the longest. And I think that's limiting, and we need to be thinking further into the future than that. If we stabilize global climate warming to 1.5 or 2 degrees C, for example, 2.0 degrees C, for example, that means 5 to 6 degrees C in places like the Inuvik region, above pre-industrial. Much warmer. The change is dynamic. It's huge, right? But in southern Canada, then things stabilize. We build bigger sewers. We deal with a bit of extra flooding. As long as you don't live by the coast, we can adapt to it. It's just going to cost a lot of money to adapt. But in places where there's ice-rich permafrost, like around Inuvik, the thawing of the permafrost isn't going to stabilize when climate warming has stabilized. Ice-rich permafrost will continue to thaw for hundreds or thousands of years. And we don't really know what the impact of that is going to be on the natural environment. So my sort of long-term vision is that our research has to be aimed at answering those long-term questions. That's where the interesting, exciting science is. And it's also where policy decisions have to be aimed at, right? Because the north, so environments like between Inuvik and Tuktoyaktuk, those kind of lake-rich, ice-rich, permafrost environments make up an area around the Arctic that's about the same size as the Greenland ice cap, almost as large as the Amazon rainforest. So these are massive areas that are going to change in unknown ways, and we have to provide the guidance as to how those are going to change, so policymakers can deal with trying to reduce climate change to the absolute minimum possible.
Definitely. Yeah, that's really interesting that you're shooting for much longer timescales. I think that's really critical.
And I guess, I mean, many of us won't be around in 10, 20, 30 years for that kind of research, but we need to be placing the long-term research into a trajectory that future scientists can work towards those long-term objectives. How do we increase the science, our science capacity to be able to thinking about those long-term changes?
Yeah, because I can imagine permafrost lags so much behind temperature, like you're saying. So
absolutely. And I mean, we all know, I mean, it's quite commonly known that Greenland, Antarctica, the ice caps are going to continue to melt for thousands of years, and sea level will continue to rise over that period of time. But I think it's less well known that permafrost will continue to thaw. Ice-rich permafrost will continue to thaw for the same lengths or even longer, right? So,
but it makes sense. So yeah, I'm sure that vision will be met. Yeah.
Well, let's hope so. That could just
Yeah.
got a lot of hard work to do to make sure that all happens, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
One more quick question, just out of curiosity. I don't think I know where the previous camp was. Um,
Exactly the same spot.
okay, okay,
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what
Yeah.
was the infrastructure like in 20, like before it got revamped?
Uh, so for the 10 years from 1991 to 2005, probably, we had two weather havens at the
Okay.
site. So it was sort of similar. So a couple of
Mhm.
weather havens, um, some tents for, working outside when it was cold and doing other
Mhm.
things, a bare fence around it, a number of platforms for sleeping tents. So it's kind of similar, but much smaller scale than it is at the moment.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure everyone's super grateful at the new camp that you guys have built. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
it's pretty plush.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So we'll move on from that
Hmm.
monster of a question.
Yeah.
Okay, so is there any advice that you would give to individuals on this project? So the project I'm working on with Oliver, in regards to visiting Trail Valley Creek. So it's kind of a general question, but maybe
Hmm.
any advice for like expectations, what it's like there.
That's the hardest question yet.
Yeah,
Exactly how
sorry. And I mean,
to,
a
no
lot of the
problem.
people coming will be locals as well. So, I mean,
Yeah.
they'll have a sense of the environment.
Yeah. So, I guess first of all, I'd encourage anybody with an interest in climate change, natural sciences, earth sciences, trying to understand the kind of work that we do out there. I'd encourage those people to come and to the camp, right? And
Mhm.
it's a, as we've said before, it's a nice, inviting um, location, right? So it's easy for people to come and visit and partake and be part of the ongoing science that everybody's doing. Everybody's um, all of the sort of team members we have, from undergraduate students to masters, PhD students, research associates, postdocs, are all they're there because they're super interested in this environment.
Mhm.
They want to provide answers to how it might change in the future, and everybody is super excited and interested in explaining the science that we're doing.
Yeah.
So I'd encourage anybody to, working through you, to come and visit us in the camp and spend a few days there. And um, I think what people would do then is participate and go out in small groups of people, and visit our research sites that are scattered over. They're all scattered within easy walking distance of the camp, and people could participate and learn about the variety of really odd equipment that we
Yeah.
have out at the site, right? So, yeah, I would encourage people to come and join us and see what we're doing.
I think that's the biggest way to learn more too, because like you said, especially when people are there at the station, they want to chat about what they're doing. And yeah, it's just
Yeah,
the easiest way to
yeah.
see a bit
Everybody's
more.
super excited about what they're doing, and there's no secrets. People want to talk about what they're doing, their backgrounds, why they're there, etc. Right? So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm really excited for two locals on our project to come visit
Yeah.
in,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
fantastic.
a
I
little
hope that
over a
all
week.
works out really well. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. They're very
Yeah, yeah.
excited as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
good.
that's where the change
Yeah.
happens. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes.
Great. All right. So question, yeah, question 6.
Yeah.
So is there one concept that you would like people to really understand about the research and or work that you do?
One concept.
Yeah, so I guess this question is kind of geared towards, science communication sometimes can be hard, if people's backgrounds are different. So is there one thing that you would really like people to understand about the work or research that you do?
Hmm. So I'm a hydrologist, so I study water, right?
Mhm.
So all of my research and my interests are based on understanding changes in water.
Mhm.
So I think the most important concept is that the system is so integrated.
Mm.
And so you can't study snow by itself. You
Mhm.
can't study permafrost by itself. Um, you need to study the whole system as an integrated component. Um, can I give one example
Oh, of course. Yeah.
of how these things, as one example? So I had a person working for me a few years ago, and he wanted to understand the link between warming spring climate and stream flow at Trail Valley Creek.
Okay.
And he looked at spring air temperatures in April and May, and of course the date when the air temperature would rise above zero was getting earlier and earlier over the last 50 years. No
Mhm.
big surprise.
Yeah.
Um, so now it's probably rises above 0 degrees C 2 to 3 weeks earlier than it did in the 1960s, for example. Pretty standard.
Yeah.
And when it air temperature above zero, the snow begins to melt.
Mhm.
He then went and looked at the stream flow from Trail Valley Creek, and oddly, it was occurring later in time.
Hmm.
And everybody does that and goes, huh, that seems kind of odd.
Yeah, it
And
does.
I didn't believe him at first. There's got to be an error. It's one bit of the data. And he eventually convinced me. He published it in a really high level journal. So he convinced all the reviewers as well. So
Mhm.
that's an example of these systems are extremely complicated and very integrated.
Mhm.
So we've been doing a lot of research recently to try to understand why that's happening.
Mhm.
And our best guess is things like there's more shrubs out in the tundra now.
Oh, okay.
What do shrubs do? They capture snow in the wintertime.
Mhm.
So now a lot more of the snow is in deep snow patches in the shrubs. And because there's less different, the blowing snow doesn't travel as far now, there's less sublimation of snow in the winter. So there's actually more snow on the landscape for a given amount of snowfall. Um, the snow-free period is longer in a lot of these places. So the active layer is deeper
Yeah.
than it used to be. So now once the snow begins to melt, it can infiltrate into a deeper active layer. So
Makes
there's
sense.
all these things that you wouldn't think of at first that
Mhm.
actually are probably delaying snowmelt runoff.
Okay.
And most of the earlier hydrologic models would not predict that
Okay. So you
at
think a
all.
lot of it could be subsurface flow?
Yeah, yeah, subsurface. Well, it would infiltrate into that active layer and refreeze. So it's now not available to run off until all the snow's gone and the active layer is thawing. And the deeper snow patches in the shrubs, for example, it takes now there's like 2 meters of snow in the shrubs. So once it starts to melt at the top, water infiltrates through the snowpack, but now it takes a week or more. So all of these probably result in a delayed runoff.
Right.
And the only way to understand these changes is to look at the fully integrated hydrologic cycle.
Mhm.
So, if there's one concept, it's that you can't look at any of these things as independent
Mhm.
processes or controlling factors. It's really that fully integrated system.
And I think it's like kind of more interesting in a way if you have the capacity to be able to understand the picture as a whole.
Yes.
There's more application for that too and more meaning. So
Yes.
if people on this project want to learn about everything that's going on as a whole, I think that would be a really great goal
Yes.
to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's sort of the next step, and how we include all of those interactions into hydrologic models
Mhm.
is complicated and difficult. Right?
Yeah, definitely. I can imagine. Yeah.
But challenging, right? And that's why many of us are scientists, right? Not because
Mhm.
it's easy, not because the
Yeah.
answers are obvious. So it's these unknown, when you look at something and you go, I don't understand that at all. It's
Mhm.
kind of like a mystery.
Yeah.
The mysteries are the fun parts of
Yeah,
what
it's
we
like
do,
solving
right?
puzzles.
Yeah, it is absolutely. Yeah.
Great. That's a really good answer. Thanks.
Yeah, you're
Awesome.
welcome.
So this is the last question we have for today, and it's more of a personal question. So what is one personal item that you take with you when you go into the field that you would never forget or hope to never forget? And why does this item make such a difference for you?
Wow, that's another interesting question, I guess.
Yeah,
Um, so it's probably changed over time.
I can imagine. Yeah.
I would imagine. Um, so we're not going to talk about good clothing or any of those things, I
Well,
guess.
some people
Could
have.
be.
I
Yeah, it could
mean,
be.
yeah, it
Yeah,
could be.
yeah. Um, so Swiss Army knife
Yeah.
for sure in the past, more in the past than present probably.
Mhm.
So the first time I did snow research in the Arctic was out of Resolute Bay for my master's. And
Okay.
I forgot
Wow.
probably the most important thing for doing snow research, lip balm and suntan lotion.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Coming from Southern Ontario, I kind of knew that because I skied a lot, but
Mhm.
I didn't think of taking it. So I have never burned so much in my life.
Did you bring glasses at least?
I did have glasses,
Okay,
yes.
that's good.
So I
Yeah.
didn't so I didn't go blind, but the rest of my
Yeah.
face suffered and my lips suffered. So I never forget that anymore.
Okay. Did you get
And
like
good.
under the nose as well, where it just like reflects and burns some?
No, yeah, probably. Yeah, yeah. So that's one thing for sure.
Mhm.
And good clothing. I've
Yeah.
learned over the years. I lived in Saskatoon for a long time, where we get pretty good cold winters. I used to bike to work all winter in
Oh, wow.
Saskatoon, minus 30, minus 40. And between that and Arctic winter field work, you quickly learn the types of clothing that really work and really don't. And you can't have your clothing has to be perfect if you're going to
Mhm.
spend all day out at those temperatures. So I
That-
have a pretty carefully selected list of clothing that
mhm.
make sure I have. Yeah. And oddly now, I guess the other thing that I just couldn't do without anymore in the field is a laptop computer.
Yeah. I mean, there's Wi-Fi at the site, so that's definitely understandable.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good internet connection, satellite internet connection. So yeah,
Mhm.
what we do now, yeah, other than good clothing, I guess a good computer is an essential bit of what we do now, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I feel like when you have the clothing just right, it's not only like life-saving in a way, but it makes it so much more enjoyable too. You can
It it
actually
it does. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. That's a great answer. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all the questions that I have today for Phil. So thank you
Yeah.
so much for providing some insight for Trail Valley Creek. And we look forward to maybe seeing you out there in the field. I'm sure our project members will get a chance to interact with you at some
Yeah,
point.
that would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, because we have lots of interactions with groups in out of Inuvik, so I'd
Mhm.
love to see more people joining us out at Trail Valley. So I look forward to that. Thanks very much, Emma.
Yeah, no problem. All
Yeah,
the best.
yeah, thanks, you too.
Okay, take
Yeah,
care.
bye.